All right, what's up, everyone? Hope you're having a great weekend so far. Welcome to Eastside. My name is Jake, and I'm one of the pastors here, and really excited for week 2 of this series. I am convinced that you are here for a reason, and God has something for you today. If you're new around Eastside, you should know that we are one church, but we meet in 7 different locations, which means we have one vision and one mission, but we get to meet all over the country. And thanks to our online campus, we get to meet genuinely all over the world. In fact, on a regular basis, there are people tuning in from Spain and Canada and the Philippines. So shout out to our international crew. So glad that you're here. And while you're already clapping, help me welcome all of our locations. That's Bellflower, Park Rapids, Redlands, online, Las Vegas, Irvine, and Anaheim. So glad you made this part of your weekend. Now, last weekend, Gene kicked off this message series called You Asked For It. And he did so by asking one of the big questions that many people have about God, and that was, are we living in the end times? And if you missed that, I encourage you to go on YouTube or the church website. You can check it out there. And not only is it helpful in clarity, but also relevant because of our current events. And so encourage you to continue praying for the citizens and the innocent lives in the Middle East in very uncertain times. But over the next couple weeks, we are going to ask some more of those big questions about following Jesus. More specifically, we are going to address some of the most frequent barriers that people cite to believing in Jesus in the first place. And what I'm convinced of is that if we look it square in the face and allow God's word to speak over it, not only will we gain clarity, but we'll also find some hope as well. Now, if you call this place home, if you've been around for a while, my guess is that at some point, whether it was in the break room at work or the cafeteria at school or maybe in the front yard with a neighbor, someone in your life walked up to you one day and they said, hey, you like go to church, right? Like you're like a Christian, right? What do you think about this? And then they asked one of those questions. One of those questions that was like super complicated to answer, or one of those questions that you were afraid might make it a little tense between the two of you, or quite frankly, just one of those questions that you didn't know the answer to yourself. I remember a couple Christmases ago, I invited my friend JJ, one of our worship leaders, to come hang out at my house after one of the nights of multiple services. And we were just whipped and tired. We were hanging out in the front yard around the fire pit, talking about nothing important. And late into the night, my neighbor came over and sat down and wanted to hang out with us, which was awesome. And he looked at me and he said, so like, what's your deal? Like, what do you believe? And I thought to myself, I said, I think this dude wants me to explain the entirety of Christianity to him at 11 p.m. and my battery's on 5%. But I said, here we go. All right, and I'm sure I gave a perfectly imperfect answer because you never know when the questions are coming or what they're going to be. And so over the next couple weeks, we hope to give you tools that'll help you answer the questions for your friends and for your family. Or maybe these are the very questions you're asking yourself. Maybe you showed up here today and you would say, man, I'm actually still unconvinced. And I want you to know we're so glad that you are here. In fact, the unofficial motto here at Eastside is that this is for everyone. Notice that the motto is not, this is for those that have it all figured out. It most certainly is not, this is for those that got their act together, or else I wouldn't be here. The motto is that this is for everyone. This is for the question askers and the cynics, the curious and the seekers. We hope you keep showing up and keep asking your questions. Now, you and I, we live in a moment in time where we could accurately be described as a hot take culture. Especially with the advent of social media, the best way for you to get attention these days is to have a contrarian opinion about a popular subject. While everyone else thinks this, you think that. While everyone else zigs, you zag, and then you get the attention you so desperately desire. So for instance, when most people are debating the greatest basketball player of all time, they're usually choosing between Michael Jordan or LeBron James. One of them has more rings, the other one has more points. One of them starred in Space Jam. The other one starred in Space Jam 2, okay? The debate goes on. Now, a hot take would be to come and enter the fray and say, actually, it's not MJ or LeBron, it's Magic, all right? Magic was the true Laker. He won championships, but he did it with style. And now he is the owner of 125 Starbucks, which makes him a successful businessman. He is the GOAT. Now, before you showed up to church today, you had no idea how many Starbucks Magic Johnson owns, but now you do, right? And this is why you come to church. You learn stuff, right? Most people, when they're debating the best household pet, they're usually debating between a dog or a cat. I mean, look how happy that dog is to be running to its owner. And look how this cat could not care less whether you were dead or alive. That's the difference. But a hot take would be to come in and say, actually, it's not dogs or cats. Snakes make for the best pet. Now, if you're at any of our locations right now and you're a snake person, would you just raise your hand real high? Just go ahead and do it for me. We're making a list of people we need to keep an eye on, all right? That's really, it's a little suspicious. Or then there's the debate of the best pizza topping. Is it pepperoni only, or is it a pizza with everything on it? But your hot take could be coming in and say, actually, it's pineapple. Pineapple is the best topping. And if you're that person today, like, what are you doing, all right? Like, you're the reason the parties are so difficult to throw. It's just, it's exhausting. It's too much. A take is your opinion. It's subjective. There's really no way of proving whether you're right or wrong, whether it's true or false. But here's where it's gotten tricky, is that we've taken this subjective opinion-based view of life and we've bled it into some of the foundational beliefs that we have, like beliefs about God and beliefs about human flourishing. What we've done is we've traded anything that's absolute and universally true for everyone and said everything actually is a matter of opinion. And so instead of saying anything should be true for everyone, we say, well, that's just your take. And so even things like the foundational beliefs about who God is, we say, well, that's just your opinion. Or holy teachings about the relationships that we ought to be in, we say, that's just your opinion. Even the divine blueprint of our bodies and our biology that God designed, we say, well, that's just a matter of opinion. Even beliefs that may determine our eternal destination, we just said, well, that's up to you. And so instead of saying that anything is true for everyone, we say what's true for you may not be true for me. And that makes our second question of the series all the more complicated to answer. Here's question number 2, and you asked for it. Is Jesus the only way to God? Is Jesus the only way to God? There's one word in that question that's doing the majority of the heavy lifting, and that's the word only. I mean, if there is a path to God, why is Jesus the only one? Now, philosophers and thought leaders decades ago were pretty convinced that as humanity advanced and technology developed, that our need for a belief in God would either decrease or disappear altogether. The more self-sufficient humanity could become, the less need we would have for faith in God. But if you pay attention to global trends at all, that could not be further from the case. In places like Africa, and Korea and China, faith communities have exploded in growth, even despite some severe outside opposition. Even in America today, spirituality is still prevalent. In fact, in a recent Pew Research poll, 80% of respondents identified as either spiritual, religious, or both. That means 80% of your friends, 80% of your coworkers, 80% of the people that go to your school would say that they are open to some kind of spiritual idea. But then in a separate poll, the same percentage, 80%, said that religion is losing influence in the public life, saying what we believe is no longer the guiding principle behind how we live. It's losing influence. And so if I were to summarize those two sets of data points, I'd put it like this. Our culture is spiritual, but not specific. We're open to the idea of a higher power, Maybe there is something that's not physical out there. We're open to the spiritual world, but we get really nervous when it gets narrow. I'm open to spirituality, but don't be too specific. And that's how you end up with someone in your life that might talk about the universe. You know anybody like that? They say, you know what, the universe has got me. The universe is in control. The universe will open doors. The universe will provide what we need. And it's this vague spirituality. And here's my hunch as to why we prefer this vagueness. Is because I like the idea that the universe is in control because I don't want that responsibility on my shoulders. That's a lot of pressure to be in charge of the world. I don't really want that. But I also don't want it to be so specific that it tells me how to live. So I like that I'm not in charge. Just don't tell me what to do with my body. I don't want to have to be in charge of the whole world. Just don't tell me to forgive anyone. And so we rely on this vague spirituality to make ourselves feel better. And today we are going to look at one of the central claims of Christianity, and I just want to warn you, it is specific. Like pinpoint accuracy, specificity. But if you'll hang with me, and if we can look at it from all the angles, what may make us uncomfortable initially with its narrowness, with its specificity, we will discover that it is truly an invitation into a life of hope and joy and peace. So to begin with, we need to figure out where this idea came from. How did any of us come to the conclusion that Jesus would be the one and only way to God? What's the source? And the short answer to that question is Jesus. Jesus said it himself. In fact, if you have a Bible or a Bible app and you want to follow along, we're going to be in John chapter 14. And so you can get a head start. That's where we're going to be hanging out today. And at this point in the life of Jesus, in John chapter 14, he's at a dinner party that is now famously known as the Last Supper. And even if you didn't grow up in church, you've almost certainly seen the famous painting where Jesus and his disciples are inexplicably only sitting around one side of the table. That's the Last Supper. And it's so far in this dinner party, some uniquely intense things have happened. Jesus kicks off the party by wrapping a towel around his waist and individually washing the feet of his disciples. That was usually a task reserved for the lowest of low servants. But here's the Son of God doing it for his followers. After he's done with that, he looks around the table and predicts that one of his disciples will betray him that night. We'll sell him out. We'll hand him over. And that launches an intense game of guess who around the table. And then finally, after all of that, Jesus looks at one of his most outspoken disciples. His name is Peter. And predicts that Peter will deny his allegiance to Jesus 3 times before the night is over. With every moment of this dinner party, it gets a little bit more intense. Everyone's on edge. And then Jesus says this in John chapter 14, verse 1. He says, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. And you know the way to where I'm going." "No, we don't, Lord," Thomas said. "We have no idea where you're going, so how can we know the way?" Now, I love this interaction between Jesus and one of his disciples, Thomas. Jesus, through this dinner party, is trying to prepare the disciples for what they can expect next. He knows that this 3-year run where they spent most of their moments together is about to come to a close. He tells them he's going to leave them, prepare an eternal home for them, come back and get them so that they can spend eternity together. And then he says, "You guys know the way." And it's at that moment, Thomas raises his hand and says, "Jesus, we have no idea what you were talking about. Quite frankly, over the last 3 years, we have rarely known what you were talking about." Jesus was always talking about things that they didn't understand. Jesus saw things that they didn't see. He understood the world in ways that they could never comprehend. And I love this interaction because it is clear that Jesus had developed such a trusting relationship with his followers that they could look him dead in the eyes and say, Jesus, you are so confusing. I don't get it at all. And I love it so much because I resonate with it so much. I often sound like Thomas. Maybe you do too. And if you ever have a conversation with God, mine often sound like this: God, what are you talking about? You want me to go where? You want me to leave what? You want me to give up that? God, I don't understand. And I want you to observe that God is not annoyed with your questions. He's not irritated with your confusion. But every once in a while, God does provide clarity. God provides clarity around our questions. And it's then that it's our responsibility to respond to what he does say. In fact, earlier in this worship service, we collectively sang a song where we promised to take him at his word. So what did God say about this question? How does Jesus respond? Look at his response in verse 6. Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. If you had really known me, you would have known who my Father is. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So if our culture is spiritual but not specific, Jesus went in the exact opposite direction. He could not have been more specific. He could not have been more clear. It is Jesus' words that say no one can come to God except through him. It wasn't the random idea of a random group of people in a random room one day. We are responding to a direct quote of Jesus's. Now at home, I have a 14-year-old daughter. She's a freshman in high school. And on many nights, she will be laboring over a homework assignment. And she will look up at me and say, Dad, am I ever going to use this when I'm an adult? And as a father who's invested in her academic success and loves her very much, I will look her dead in the eyes and say, nope. But I had to learn it when I was your age, and now you're a student, and that's the way life goes. Life is tough. But at some point in your education, you had a grammar lesson, and in that grammar lesson, you learned about parts of speech. And when you were learning about parts of speech, you were introduced to definite articles, like the word the. And so Jesus is saying that he is definitely the way. He is definitely the truth. He is not a truth amongst equally valid other truths. He is the truth and the life. And so it's simply our responsibility to respond to the claims that Jesus made about himself. Is it true? And if it's true, how should it change the way we live? Now, this is not new that this claim of Jesus's has been a stumbling block for people. It's been tripping people up for the last 2,000 years. And so today we want to look at 3 of the big objections to Jesus's claim about himself. Objection number 1 sounds like this. It's arrogant to claim that you have the truth. What a prideful thing to say. You're telling me out of all 8 billion people, many of whom disagree with you, you're saying that you have the one and only truth. Doesn't that mean that you're saying that you're smarter than other people? Doesn't that mean you're saying that you're better than other people? What a prideful example. And so our culture responded to this perceived pride by promoting the idea of tolerance. I don't know if you remember this. When I was a kid in school, that was the buzzword of the moment, that we were supposed to tolerate the idea that other people look differently than us, they live differently than us, they believe different things. And so we were supposed to allow for people to live their lives differently than the way we live ours. But then our culture advanced from tolerance to affirmation. Instead of just allowing for all these ideas to exist, we were called to affirm them as all equally valid. Everybody's right. No one is wrong. And hopefully the idea was that that would make religion less divisive than it has been historically. Now, every generation likes to think that they're smart and that we have new ideas, but this idea has been around for a really long time. In fact, there's a story from Hindu folklore in India that tried to promote the same idea. Story goes like this. There's a group of blind men that discover an elephant for the very first time. And they discover different parts and try to describe the elephant to the rest of the group. So the first blind man grabs the tusk of the elephant and says, oh, an elephant is like a sword. But then another blind man in the group grabs the tail of the elephant and says, what are you talking about? No, an elephant is like a rope. Then a third blind man says, he grabs the leg of the elephant and says, guys, both of you are wrong. An elephant is like the trunk of a tree. And the supposed moral of the story is that all of them were right and all of them were wrong. They had pieces of the picture, but they didn't have the full picture. So let's affirm one another's perspective, but never claim to see the whole thing. And I know that immediately sounds maybe tolerant or kind or like a kumbaya moment, let's all get along, but eventually the story falls apart because there's one character in the story that isn't blind. It's the narrator. The narrator sees the full picture. The narrator knows it's an elephant. The narrator sees all the truth, but tells everyone else they only have a slice of the truth. No matter who you are, no matter what you say, it is impossible to avoid making absolute truth claims. Even if you walked in here today saying, I think it's wrong for anyone to say they have the truth, that itself is a truth claim. It's impossible to avoid. We all do it. So then we get to objection number 2, and it's a little more relational in tone, and it sounds like this. It's just mean to say someone is wrong. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and so to tell them that they're wrong, that sounds mean. Now, some of you read that statement on the screen and you say, oh, I don't have that problem at all. I tell people they're wrong all the time. And we know that's why you don't have friends, okay? You should be nicer. You really should. But for most of us, we don't want to go around saying, hey, that fundamental thing about you, I disagree with that. And then culturally, we've gotten to this place where we tell everyone else in the world, if you like me, and if you love me, then it is your obligation to affirm everything about me. You have to affirm what I think. You have to affirm what I believe. You have to affirm all my relationships. You have to affirm my worldview. And if you disagree with me, then that falls on the scale somewhere between hurtful and hateful. And we've convoluted disagreement with bigotry. And friends, that is a shallow view of relationships. Disagreement is not the same thing as disrespect. Now, it's certainly possible to be disrespectful as you disagree with someone. The words that you choose, the tone that you take, whether you choose to condescend them in your conversation, all of that is disrespectful, but it's not necessary. You can disagree with someone that you love. In fact, I would like to suggest to you today that in certain situations in life, disagreeing with someone is one of the most loving things you can do. If you have someone in your life that is in a dangerous or abusive relationship, isn't the most loving thing to do to disagree with their desire to stay? You have to disagree out of love. As a parent, it would be foolish for me to affirm my children's desire to play in the street. I know that looks fun for them, but I know that this is at a minimum dangerous, at a maximum could lead to their death. So I disagree with their desires. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is disagree. But the thing that we're debating today is whether our confidence in Jesus, our conviction about who he is that a matter of opinion or is it a matter of life and death? I like the way author Rebecca McLaughlin stated it. She said, if I say Christianity is true and Hinduism, Islam, and Buddhism are not, is that like saying stop smoking, it could kill you, something you would lovingly say to someone in your life, or more like saying my grandmother's cooking is better than yours? Is it a matter of opinion or is it a matter of life and death? Here's the third objection that we have around Jesus' claim about himself is that I can like Jesus, but I just don't have to follow him. My guess is you got someone in your life that would say it just like that. Like, I'm cool with Jesus. I just don't have to be a Christian. I can like him from afar, but I don't have to devote my life to him. And we've settled for this casual fandom of Jesus that honestly, most of our culture would agree with. When you get to know the life of Jesus, it's hard not to admire him. When you hear what he taught and the revolution of love that he unleashed on his community, it's easy to admire. When you see the way that he interacted with the disadvantaged and the disabled, it's hard not to admire Jesus. And so in our world, most people are a fan of him, but the problem is Jesus didn't leave us that option. He said it's either full devotion or it's a full rejection, but the middle ground was never a choice. In the last book of the Bible called Revelation, Jesus addresses some of the churches that existed at the time. And there's one church in a community called Laodicea, and they liked Jesus. They were cool with Jesus. They even had one of his quotes in their Instagram bio. They had the t-shirts, like they were down with Jesus. They were cool. But look at how Jesus responds to them. He says, I know all the things you do, that you're neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. You say, I'm rich. I have everything I want. I don't need a thing. And you don't realize that you're wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Jesus is looking at them and saying, you may not have rejected me, but I will reject you. They were saying, man, we're cool with Jesus. We're fans of him. We'll show up once a week. We'll show up on the holidays. Like, that's pretty cool. But we don't necessarily feel like we need him. And if you look at the details of their life in Laodicea, they were rich. They were affluent. They could pay the bills. They ate off the charcuterie boards. They went on tropical vacations. They had what they needed. And they didn't feel like they needed Jesus. And so they kept him at a distance. They were vaguely spiritual, and Jesus says that was never an option. I mean, when you think about the claim that Jesus made, Jesus just told us that he is God, and he's the only way to God. Indifference or casual fandom is not a logical response to that claim. Think about later this weekend. Say you're scrolling through your feed and this guy that you went to high school with makes a post and says that he is now God. You would know what to do with that claim. It would be an easy rejection. You would look at him and say, bro, I sat next to you in Spanish class. You are not God. I heard the crude jokes you made in the locker room. I know you are not God. It would be an easy thing to reject. But for some reason, we've said we like Jesus, even though he said some wild things, and it's never an option. Author C.S. Lewis famously said Jesus was either liar, lunatic, or Lord. Either he was so self-involved and narcissistic that he created an entire religion about himself and should be rejected, or he was a mentally unstable person that made claims of grandiosity and we ought to reject that as well. Or he is literally the Son of God that showed up to this world and died in our place and rose again. And if that is true, it cannot be a middling response. It's full devotion. Jesus said there's two choices, full devotion or full rejection. And before you leave our time here today and choose to reject Jesus as the only way to God, if you'll just give me a couple minutes, I'd like to describe to you what you would be rejecting. I know that claim initially sounds like Jesus was keeping a bunch of people away from God. But if we look at it a little closer, you will find the most inclusive invitation you've ever received. Jesus said he's the way, the truth, and the life. When Jesus said he was the way, what did he mean? Like, the way to what? Where are we going? Jesus was telling us that he is the only way to a restored relationship with God. Jesus is the only way that God goes from our divine boss to our heavenly Father. And those are two different relationships, aren't they? With my divine boss, I feel obligated to perform. I live in fear. And at the end of the year, I get an employee review that tells me whether I'm still on the team or not. But my heavenly Father, he provides comfort and security and love and identity, and I can never get fired with him. Like I've told you already, I got kids at home, and one of them is our 2-year-old daughter. Her name is Cozy. This is a picture of her on her 2nd birthday. I know. And she was walking around Disney World like she owned the place. I'm a little concerned we have instilled too much self-confidence in this little girl. Might come back to bite us. She started doing this thing at home when music is playing in the living room. She will come up to the couch and she will wrap all 5 of her little fingers around one of your fingers, and she will pull you off the couch. She will take you over to the baby gate, not so that she can be lifted over or let through, but so that she can hold on to the gate and do ballerina dance moves like this. And then she'll look at you and expect you to hold on to the gate and do the same thing, and you do because she looks like this. And in those moments, I am just this puddle of fatherly affection for my daughter saying, girl, you can have whatever you want. Like there's not a dollar I wouldn't spend. There's not a night I wouldn't lose sleep. There's not a teenage boy I wouldn't beat up. Like I will do whatever you need. And friends, I'm like the world's okayest dad. Like I'm fine. Some days I get it right. More often than not, I get it wrong. And what Jesus is inviting you into, this is your invitation, a way back to a perfect dad. A perfect dad that says, I love you because you're my kid. Not because you did it right long enough. Not because you finally overcame that hurdle on your own. I love you because you're mine. And I will give you the security that you've always lacked. I will tell you who you are so you don't have to prove it to anyone else. Jesus is the way back to the Father. Then he says he's the truth. He's the truth. Now, one of the popular developments of our common vernacular is that we've started encouraging people to live your truth. And the idea is that you may have your version of truth, and I might have my own version of truth, but they don't have to be the same thing. Famously, Oprah Winfrey encouraged everyone during an Oscars performance to say, you need to live your truth. And if you play it out very long, logically, it breaks down, but I think I understand the sentiment. And the sentiment is that every single one of us has something that we're living for. Some kind of purpose, some kind of driving force. Usually early in our lives, in our youth, it's an ideal. We're very idealistic, and we say, this is the kind of person that I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be the most loving and accepting and affirming and tolerant person in the world. I don't care who you are, I don't care what you say, I don't care how you express, you will always be loved by me. And then one day, you meet the person that pushes you to the limits of your tolerance. Their morality was so corrupt, politics were so irreconcilable, their lifestyle was so vile that you couldn't possibly accept them, and you realize that you're not actually as tolerant as you thought you were. Then you decide, well, I'll just be generous. I'll give it all away. I'll make a difference, only to find out that there's always someone more generous than you. Ideas are an unbearable weight on our shoulders because it requires us to perform to perfection. We have to live them out perfectly every single day, and none of us can. So then we move on from ideas and we find people. And we say, okay, these people in my life, they will now be my purpose. They'll be my truth. It might be family or friends. More often than not, it's a romantic partner. And we say, well, now you are the one that is my truth. And then just a few days later, we find out that they're just as imperfect as we are. They have trauma from their past that they too have yet to work out. And in the middle of the night, they leave the toilet seat up. And we realize this is not what I thought it was going to be. And if our truth, if our purpose in life is to please the other people in our lives, they too demand perfect performance. As long as you always do the right thing, then the relationship is strong. But the minute you mess up, it might be over. And here comes Jesus. And Jesus says, I am the truth that forgives. Every other religion says perform. Every other relationship says perform. Every other secular worldview says you have to perfectly perform or else you are a failure. And Jesus says, I know you better. And I love you anyway. In fact, I showed up to do what you couldn't. Jesus came to this earth to live the perfect life we couldn't pull off. He paid the price for our sin that we couldn't afford. He defeated our enemy death that we had no chance against, and now he has promised us a perfect eternity that we could never earn. Jesus is the truth that forgives. Then finally, Jesus says he's the way, or he's the life, he's the life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And this life is a response to the truth. This life says no longer are you determined your worth by how well you perform. In fact, it's Jesus' perfect performance that is counted as yours. Now you get to live in freedom. You get to live in grace. You get to live in true joy because of what Jesus has done for you. And so as we wrap up today, I'd like to talk to two different groups of people. Some of you showed up today and you already believed that Jesus is the only way. You didn't need convincing. And I want to encourage us that if that truly is our conviction, that truly is our belief, then the only life response to that is unending humility and kindness and patience with those that don't agree with us. Unfortunately, the truth about Jesus being the only way to God has historically been used as a blunt force object against those that disagree. Sometimes it's used as one of those mic drop argument moments in a Facebook comment fight, and that's just never its intention. It was never intended to hurt anyone. It was an invitation into the life that we all desperately need. The message of the gospel is that I, Jake Barker, I was so bad that it required nothing less than God himself to show up and save me. And now my response is a life of humility, inviting other people to receive the grace that I know. And then I also know that there's a group of people here and you showed up today and you would have been in that middle ground. Like you're cool, Jesus, like the idea, appreciate some of the teachings, but you've never made the decision. You've never said that you were all in. And with as much love and kindness and as your friend as I possibly can say, today is your day. Today is your day to no longer ride the fence. Today is your day to no longer be a fan, but to go all in because Jesus lived for you and he died for you and he rose again so that we can have that life. And so if you're ready to make that decision, I'm going to pray a prayer for you and I'm going to invite you to join me in that prayer, making this the moment that your life changes forever. Will you pray with me? Father, we are grateful for the clarity. And we know that in this world of pluralistic ideas and subjectivity, this can be unpopular, but we believe you because of who you are, believe you because of what you've done. We believe you because of the promises that you kept. And so today, we're making the decision that we're in. No longer 1 foot in and 1 foot out, but we want to go all in for you. We want to respond to the good news. We want to respond to the grace. We want to live for you for the rest of our lives as fully devoted followers, inviting other people to become the same. We pray these things in your son's perfect name. Amen.